This is my farm.
Don't come out here and tell me what I need.
I need solutions that work and market options that are worth my time.
Small town support that sees the bigger picture.
A global network that empowers us. A co-op that's there for us every day.
Thank you for joining us here on Agri-Pulse.com. We're joined today by Congressman Jimmy Panetta, a Democrat from California, looking to discuss a wide variety of issues important to agriculture, both nationwide and in the Congressman's home state of California. And on that subject, Congressman, want to talk about some news that we saw this week from the Department of Agriculture that's probably been the biggest news of the week for the industry, no matter what state you're in. And that is the rolling out of the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. We had seen some top-line numbers on this a couple of weeks ago, saw the specifics and some of the specific language on it this week. So with that in mind, we've had a lot of different thoughts kind of in agriculture this week on how this program will impact various sectors. And your district is home to what a lot of people in the rest of the country call specialty crops. I suppose in your area, they're just called crops. But your district and this bill and this program, how do you think Cfap will impact the producers in your district?
Yeah, it's an understandable question, especially with what we're going through at this point. And obviously, Spencer and Phil, thank you guys very much for highlighting what we always like to talk about here on the Central Coast, and that is our specialty crops, being that we're part of the salad bowl of the world, berry bowl of the world, artichoke capital of the world, and on and on and on. We have so many appellations here that we are very proud of. And what you have to realize is that these producers here with our specialty crops on the Central Coast of California, you know, they're not used to taking these types of payments. This is not how they're brought up, to be honest with you. You know, and thankfully, because of the prices that we have for our specialty crops. But that being said, with this pandemic, this obviously is something that has affected all of us in one way or the other, especially us here with our specialty crops. So, you know, when the 16 billion came out for the purchases and 3 billion, for the payments, and then the extra 3 billion for the purchases, obviously we wanted to make sure that specialty crops were included. Because as you've heard, and as you know well, Spencer, you know, there were crops that were having to be dissed under for a number of reasons, not just with the supply chains, but as you know, one of the number one issue here is agriculture labor and making sure we had the labor force were not only in place with our numbers, but making sure they were protected as well. So yeah, so we fought for getting our fair share. And I believe we got that when it came to the 2.1 billion out of the 16 for direct payments going to specialty crops. And how it's allocated, as you know, there's certain different categories for our specialty crops, with the 5% or greater losses being the first section. Second section is either the shipped crops that were then spoiled, and then the third section being the crops that were ready for shipping, didn't go out, or had been harvested and didn't go out as well. So it's, you know, taking those into account. Obviously, that's something that our producers here on the Central Coast will take advantage of. But you also got to realize, considering what I started off with, that we're not used to getting these types of direct payments, certain procedures are not in place for our guys. So what data is the USDA going to rely on? And we haven't been, in that mentality and had those methods of collecting that data for the USDA to prove these losses. Therefore, that's something that we have to work on a little bit more. Obviously, with the limits and the payments, and initially the 125,000 up to 250,000 on the limitations of these payments, that's something where, fortunately, I was able to lead a letter for the specialty crops, got over 100 signatories on it, bipartisan, bicameral, basically asking the USDA to up those limitations. Now, they did that somewhat in regards to making sure that it's up to 750,000, but up to 3 shareholders, 250,000 each. As you know well, Spencer, the prices per acre here on the Central Coast can get up to $30,000 per acre for a strawberry field. So it's going to be difficult. It will be real easy meeting that limitation for our specialty crops for most of them. And then, of course, we got to start thinking about what were the losses after April 15th. Like, these losses cover from January 15th to April 15th. well, what's going to happen after 15th? Because we know, well, this pandemic's going to continue. And we just got to make sure that our guys are covered because, as you know well, we're part of the food security of this nation, an instrumental part of it, and we'll continue to be during this pandemic, and we want to be after that. So we got to make sure that these certain provisions are in place, the clarification and the guidelines are in place in order for us to get those direct payments, but obviously thinking what else can benefit our guys here so that we can continue producing like we do and continue deserving those appellations that I talked about when it comes to describing what we do here on the Central Coast of California.
Congressman, to look ahead a little bit, as you know, a week ago, the House passed the HEROES Act, which included $16.5 billion in additional Cfap payments, these direct payments. There's a number of farm groups. The American Farm Bureau Federation is supporting going all the way to $68 billion in terms of spending authority at USDA. A lot of farm groups say a lot more than $16.5 billion is needed. What are the prospects for getting more than that? Do you think more than that is needed? And there are other priorities that you have that really need to be in this next stimulus bill?
I appreciate you asking that. Look, I mean, the good thing is that it's funny, and it's been the example of all the letters. I mean, we've written a number of letters to the USDA and even to President Trump. And the great thing is they've been bipartisan. They've been bicameral. And so everybody understands the value of agriculture, be it from an ag district or not. People understand how important it is to have food security and how important it is for our supply chains to keep on going so that we can continue to have food on our tables at this important time, and highlights how we need it at all times. And so, I think obviously there's a lot of support for those types of funding, that type of funding when it comes to the HEROES Act. It was demonstrated in the CARES Act. We passed it in the HEROES Act, but you also got to realize that there are a lot of political hurdles that we're dealing with, and a lot of priorities at this point when it comes to the HEROES Act and what else can be in there. We will continue to advocate to make sure that there is the proper funding necessary, but you also have to look at, like I said, it's not just the payments. Let's talk about purchases. We, especially here on the Central Coast, as I mentioned, there was that $3 billion for purchases and the farm to table purchases. But we want to make sure that it's there's some issues with that, and making sure that it runs a little more smoothly going forward. We've heard a lot of discussion about that lately, at least in the circles that I've been talking to, and it just seems that the USDA doesn't have the bureaucracy, for lack of a better word, in place to administer that type of food purchase in a smooth fashion. So we need to work on that a little bit more and make sure that going forward that, one, there's more purchases, not just payments, a little bit more for purchases, I should say, especially for our fresh fruits and vegetables, but also make sure that the administration is there for them to do it. I mean, I've been out at a few food banks here on the Central Coast, and it's great to see the fresh fruits and vegetables that are in the packages that we're handing out to the cars lined up for miles to get into these food banks. We got to make sure that it's those types of things that are there. For those fresh fruits and vegetables are not just there, but provided to the food bank to get out to people who need it the most. Look, I put forward a bill called the SNAP Carry Act, which basically allows people who are SNAP beneficiaries to use their benefits at restaurants. To me, as I say it, this kind of kills three birds with one stone, in that you're going to benefit the restaurants who are hurting right now, as you know. It benefits the people who are using their SNAP benefits by going to those restaurants, and it benefits our farmers who provide those food to restaurants that are really getting hurt in the restaurant sales. As you know, there's, you have the retail industry and you have the restaurant sales, and those who have just put all their focus onto the restaurants are really taking a hit right now. This will at least help them out as well, those farmers who are sending their fruits and vegetables there. And then obviously going forward, look, as I mentioned, and as you know, with specialty crops, it really is about labor. That's been the number one issue. Even when I first got into Congress and there was a 5-year drought here in California, You talk to my producers here, and they will tell you the number one issue has been immigration. And it still is, with the failure, and I'll say that, the failure of Washington, D.C. to pass sensible, reasonable immigration reform. Not to say that we haven't done that in Congress. We did that with the Farmworker Modernization Act, of course, but hoping the Senate and the president takes that up. But right now, the failure to not do that, the crackdown at the border, the deportation of people back to their home countries, immigration is still hurting. And so we need to make sure that there's immigration reform. And if we don't have immigration reform, then we dang well better protect those that are here with our shrinking and aging workforce, making sure that those who are coming in through our H-2A visas are protected, putting those protections in place going forward so that we can continue to produce with people. We're fortunate here on the Central Coast that we understand how valuable our farm workers are, but this pandemic is highlighting how vulnerable they are as well when it comes to not only deportation, but also this disease, their working conditions. And we have a bunch of, we had our county supervisors here in Monterey County immediately got ahead of it, worked with farm workers and our producers to put together a set of standards that actually evolved over the last month to make sure that standards are in place, that PPE is there, PPE is worn, but also education for the people who are coming here into our country and understanding that this is real. This is something where you have to take affirmative steps by the farm worker, not just the producer, but the farm worker itself, because you can get more buses. Yes, you can spread out more buses for people to go from, their homes to the fields, spread them out in the fields. But at the same time, when they go home, what standards are in place at home? They have to understand that in these living conditions, be it in their farm worker housing or in their single family housing, that they have to understand they have to take steps as well to prevent the spread of this disease. So it's education as well. We've set the standard here on the Central Coast that is kind of spread throughout California when it comes to farm workers. Hopefully it spreads throughout the country, but that's something that needs to be in place. And I wrote a letter that we just submitted today with over 70 signatories on it, basically asking the USDA, saying if there is any future funding from the CCC program, that it include the proper protections for our farm workers, that there are certain amounts of that funding that goes directly to protecting our farm workers, from testing to PPE to education. That's what needs to be there when it comes to the people who are so instrumental in making sure that our crops are produced. So just continuing to slug away. But that's how it is in Washington, D.C. these days, and how it's been ever since I've been there for the past 3 years, especially when it comes to something as important as immigration reform, ag labor, and agriculture.
Congressman, you mentioned very rightly that fruit and vegetable growers are not used to getting these sorts of payments, starting with the MFP, Market Facilitation Program payments, now with these payments, and a lot of most other producers around this country, no matter what the commodity, you're not used to getting the magnitude of payments. Economists are not predicting, any real upturn in a lot of in the farm economy, even after this year, after we get past this. What are Democrats going to support this level of spending going forward? Is this being built into? Is this level of spending getting built into farmers' expectations?
Well, look, like I said, I mean, look, you know better than most people, both of you gentlemen do, the attitude of farmers. And that's why I really love representing this district, but also representing the farmers and the farm workers in this district, because as I've learned it, they constantly work to get over hurdles. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles that are put in place of people who work in farm workers, be it Mother Nature, be it our mandates and regulations, be it the markets, be it immigration. But they're constantly pivoting to get over these hurdles. And so that's that attitude of not needing bailouts. They want business. And I think that attitude is prevalent. Even when these payments started coming in through the CCC early on, when our specialty crops didn't get any of that money based on the trade wars that were occurring, you still saw farmers stepping up and saying, we don't want bailouts, we want business. And I think that is the attitude of people in agriculture. Therefore, look, they're not going to turn down these payments, okay? And we understand exactly why, because they're needed. They're definitely needed, and they're appreciated. But at the same time, people in agriculture, be it on the central coast of California or throughout this country, they know better than to rely on the government to help them out. That's not their attitude. Their attitude is very self-sufficient in a lot of ways. And, that's why I like supporting them. That's why I like providing them with the help that is necessary at the federal level. And so I do think it is bipartisan. I do think that Democrats, not just from ag districts, but Democrats across this country understand how important agricultural is to our food security. It's being highlighted by this pandemic. I've always said in Washington, D.C., there's governing by leadership and there's governing by crisis. Now, right now, we know there's governing by crisis, but let's hope that motivates people to do the right thing, to lead when it comes to agriculture at all times. And I think it will. I mean, it's demonstrated by the bipartisan, bicameral nature of the efforts that we've put forward just in this pandemic. And I believe that will, I hope, and I am confident that will carry through once we get past this pandemic, so that we continue to serve the people who continue to put food on our table.
And want to wrap up with something here today. It's a topic that you've touched on a number of times in your various responses to our questions here, and that's the subject of farm labor. It's for someone that's been following farm policy, and especially someone that's been following farm policy in California. It's not a new subject. It's been a very hot topic for quite a while now. Oh, yeah. But as we kind of get to or make our way through this COVID-19 pandemic, some forward-looking concerns are emerging as well. I know you mentioned your letter regarding the protection of some of these farm workers already in the country, but also some growing concerns about potential for farm workers in future growing seasons as well. If there's some lingering concerns about shutdowns of foreign consulates and whatnot. I guess my question is, what are you hearing from your producers at this point about some of those potential concerns? And at this point, what can be done in the nation's capital, via legislatively, administratively, what have you, to kind of address some of those concerns?
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Appreciate that question. Obviously, thanks for that softball, because that is a softball, because that's a topic that's very, very important to me, and one that we've been working on throughout my time in Washington, D.C. And so kind of, moving forward real quick, that's why right away, when the State Department decided to stop all visa processing at their consulates in Mexico, including H-2A processing, we immediately wrote a letter. I led a letter that was bipartisan and told the State Department, please don't do this. Please understand how important it is to our agriculture and to our food security. Now, we got some pushback. We got some pushback by obviously anti-immigrant groups. We got some pushback by groups that support immigrants, basically wanting to protect our domestic workers. But the fact is that we knew it was the right thing to do, to make sure that we had the H-2A workers coming in and supporting our agriculture. But we can't rely on that. We understand that. And we have to make sure that we do protect those that have come here to work in our agriculture, those who have taken the risk to come here to go out and do backbreaking work that many domestic workers will not do. Despite, I've heard people say, well, now that, there are people out of work, they may be, inclined to go into the fields and work in agriculture. You know as better than I do, both of you do, that will not happen. It's very tough work to be out there in the fields. And people who are willing to take the risk to come to that country, those are the people who are willing to work in the fields. Thank goodness for us. Thank goodness for us on the Central Coast. That is basically what we've realized, that immigration, immigrants, and immigration reform is so important to our communities, to our culture, who we are, but also to our country. And that's why we'll continue to work on it going forward. And that's why, we worked very hard over these past 9 months to pass the Farmworker Modernization Act, a bipartisan bill with farmers and farm workers, Republicans and Democrats at the table, just grinding away for 9 months to formulate a policy that really focuses not just on our domestic workforce, on the domestic immigrants who have been here, who are working hard, but making sure there's a streamlined process for our H-2A workers coming in here. And like I said, I'm not just proud of the substance, I'm very proud of the formulation of that bill. like I said, this is how legislation in Washington, D.C., especially when it comes to tough issues like immigration, should be formulated. It should not be from top down, like you're seeing a lot of legislation in Washington in Congress put forward. This was a bottom-up effort of both sides just kind of coming together and peaking with this Farmworker Modernization Act. It was a tough climb. Trust me, it was a tough climb, and a lot of groups kind of left the table at one point or the other, but they kept on climbing up, and we met in the middle, and it truly was a comprehensive bill that I believe is why it was bipartisan, but also why the Senate needs to look at this seriously, and why this administration needs to look at this seriously, be it up to November of 2020 or an administration thereafter needs to consider this. And this is a foundation that we have laid on a bipartisan basis that helps farmers and farm workers that I believe will help our agriculture in the future.
So obviously a wide variety of subjects to discuss here with, a lot of different things going on in agriculture and farm policy, and a lot of different things going on in the different regions and different production systems in the country. And Congressman Panetta, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time to join us to discuss them.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do to highlight not just what we do, but what our people in agriculture do. It's so important that they rely. I know a number of people who rely on Agri-Pulse and the reporting and the information that you get out there from the work that we do in Congress to help our people in agriculture. So thanks to both of you.
Well, appreciate that. We did not ask for the sponsorship solicitation there, but we'll certainly take it, and I think that'll do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher and Congressman Jimmy Panetta, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.